All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the regular meeting of the Finance Committee. It's September 4th and it's 9 o'clock. So I'll call this meeting to order. Ida, roll call, please.
Director McKee,
Here.
Vice Chair, Pete,
Here.
Chair Sherwood.
Here.
You have the floor.
Thank you. Any public communications? And do we have anyone online?
I should have.
And I
I
don't,
have members online, but no comment.
no comments. Okay. Anyone here? All right, we'll move on to our discussion action items. For A, we have our Finance Committee minutes. Any comments or I'll take a motion?
So move.
I'll second. Do we have any comments from the public on this item? No? All right, we'll come back. All right, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All right, looks like it's unanimous. Approved. All right, we'll move on to discussion of the white paper, the edited and public summary versions. That too.
I'll do the intro. So thank you, Chair. At this point, we heard a little bit of as we received the white paper document, how the level of reading was extensive, and for it to be put out to the community that way would be difficult. We did indicate the intent of the white paper was for our board members to deliver the same message around why we take external volume here at ReGen, which we completed and the report was received. But staff went out, investigated a little bit, and we were able to find a solution for getting a version narrowed down by an editor. And so at this point, I'll hand it off to Guy Pitchburger, who took the lead on getting our initial received white paper into another written document form, which carries the same context, just at a lower level.
Yeah, the staff's takeaway from the last board meeting and the director's discussion, was that one might as well accomplish the two different goals that the board directors were discussing. One was to have the white paper edited, so that it was a little more grammatically correct and maybe not as chunky in its reading. And we shared that assessment and recommend, also have recognized the need and felt that it was appropriate to accomplish that before it's ever posted on the website. And that's the full white paper. And so in the finance committee packet was a red line strikeout version. So one, if desired, could go through the document and see where changes were made. And then the other was the clean version of that same document. So for the full white paper, those two files are present in the packet. We're certainly open to receiving any comments that one might have today. So we can take it away and make any final adjustments for the board version. That being said, you do have about a week until next Wednesday to also provide feedback to us on this agenda item or on the other agenda items. So it's not end all today. So we're open to receiving comments and making changes to the board version.
Are there any items of note that have been brought forward either through staff or from the public or whatever?
No, it was really solely and exclusively the discussion that was had at the last board meeting, and it's that same version of the white paper. So that's the full version, We also took the opportunity to get engage with the editor on her ability to convert that full document to a general public or reader's digest type version, which, you know, was the other interest being expressed in the discussion. And it's a totally a different document. The two thoughts were not compatible. They do need to live two different places. So there is a draft version of, the Reader Digest that's new, part of the packet, and that's also open for comment today and in the next week from you.
I was so excited to see that you guys jumped on this. I was really happy.
Well, we looked at the details first. We didn't know what it was gonna cost us
Yeah.
and if we could have the option to do it, what was in our bandwidth, but as we looked at it, we felt we can execute by that next meeting since we had the time off.
Right,
So we pushed really hard, team delivered, so we're excited to be able to deliver on the two fronts. One is if we're gonna post it on the website, then we better have a good version of it that's gonna make some sort of sense to
mhm,
a common reader that doesn't have 30 years of industry knowledge or 20 years of industry knowledge, so we feel very comfortable with the second edit.
yeah, no, I read the strikeout version just to kind of see where the changes were made, and the grammatical changes were beautiful, so I was really pleased. It's a much tighter document. And I'm happy with the readability of the draft summary too. I think that'll be really good. So, yeah, no, I'm pleased. Peter, did you have any other questions?
Just when you read this kind of first time through, it's a lot of words, a lot of pages, it's a lot of effort. And if it were 3 or 4 pages, you know, say people would tend to read it more. This after it's well written and it's edited and it looks good, it's gonna be tough to read them.
Are you talking about the
full-
white paper or the drafts? Did you see the draft
white paper.
or the draft sort of summary? Because we're looking at both, right?
Yeah,
So you
yeah.
have the white paper that's been edited,
I understand.
right?
I'm just saying it's good. It's just the number of people that really read through this.
We agree, but we wanted that public transparency. We heard it really loud and clear in the discussion.
Yep.
And we didn't slow down the process of receiving the original white paper in its
Mhm.
original form. You know, so we felt some ownership there that we wanted to return back. Go ahead, guy.
And the thought process in the website presentation is to lead with the Reader Digest version, the
Mhm.
4-page one that's easy to read, and have an ability for that reader to see that there's a larger document behind it if they want to go to it.
Yeah.
So I think in practice, the short version is going to get 90+% of the attention,
Mhm.
and
Although it's good you did the white paper. I mean, it'll be great for you know,
Staff.
new board members, staff, right, that, so no, for right now, I don't have any additional comments other than I'm just really pleased to see this.
Yeah, we still deliver the facts around why we receive outside of
Yeah.
the county vault.
Right.
Yeah.
and sharing the draft cover
Oh, nice.
to replace the versions you've seen before.
Yeah. Very cool. I like it. Good. Peter, any additional comments?
No comment.
Do we have any comments from the public online on this item? Nope. Okay. All right, we'll move on to next item, which is discuss the draft compost operations agreement.
Okay, thank you, Chair. On this item here, we have been working to do 2 items. One is to renew the agreement with Keep Day. The other is to essentially own the composting permit here at ReGen and not under the Keep Day brand. And Mr. Petroborg has worked on drafting a comprehensive that describes the relationship that we have with Gavilan Ag, also known as Keep Day. And we're here at this point where we are going to be proposing extending their agreement and extending it for a long term within the board packet, you'll find the findings of how long they've been here, what they've been doing for us, and items that will be changing in the future as well. So at this point, we will jump into the presentation around the draft agreement, how we've gotten here. But I think we're excited to close the chapter on having an open agreement where we want to have some time with the third party producer of this. He has a good relationship with ReGen in what we do currently today. He's very attentive to the need when it comes to any part of the operation. And he also has a very good public relation with the outlet for the material that we have here. And as we look across the landscape, not everybody has that perfect match of not only have someone making the product, but also getting rid of the product. In many instances, a lot of people could come into an agency and create the product, but not always delivering on that second aspect of it, is getting rid of the product at a fair price or market price that we see. So at this point, we'll pass it over to Guy. He'll go through the draft compost operations agreement.
Maybe you got a quick in for that. There. And I'll follow it. So this is great. So we have discussed this proposed agreement on a number of occasions in the past year. But essentially, the currently operating under a lease agreement. It was an annual renewal since 2009 up until about 2021. And then there was an adoption of a 3-year agreement with a couple 1-year extensions. That's ending at the end of this fiscal year. The discussion has been to transition to a long-term agreement. Both ReGen and Keith Day Company have their mutual and separate interests in a long-term agreement. And it's mainly around having a higher level of security of the business operations and the ability to rely on that for the purpose of making capital investments. The ReGen has generally filled the role of making large capital investments in the real property. Come more on the fixed asset side, while the operator has been able to make investments on the equipment side, more mobile assets. That's kind of been the division of the relationship. That is envisioned to continue in the new agreement. The term of the agreements being proposed as a 15-year base term with 2 5-year optional extensions. That is significant to allow both parties to make some capital decisions, which are pressing around the covered area static pile method conversion. So this will be helpful for that. As part of this proposed agreement, the operator is going to transfer the ownership, allow for the transfer of the permit ownership to ReGen. So the public entity would then have ownership of the permit that is, also on property owned by the public entity. Which, will have improvements, that are grant related from public funds. All, examples of representing the community's interests, and the public's interest in having, the permit under ReGen's ownership. It would, in the event that the operator, was terminated or no longer, providing the service, it would allow ReGen, having that permit ownership to, solicit and retain a new operator. That's a notable change from the current situation where the operator is the owner and the operator of the compost permit. The ReGen would have to go through the full process of proposing a facility, preparing all the operating reports for that facility, submitting the applications to get consideration of having a permit issued to ReGen. By making this change as part of this agreement, ReGen will then have standing to, with a permit in hand and owned, to be able to make, more immediate operating decisions in the situation. We have added a termination clause, because 15 to 25 years is a long time in business, and so the ReGen has interest in being able to affect a change if one is necessary, but in a process that allows a 12-month notice to cure period, and if that isn't satisfied, then there's still 2 years before operations would cease with that operator.
Sorry to interrupt you guys. Can you just remind me again what notice to cure even means?
It means to rectify the claim or deficiencies that are leading to a dispute
Okay,
of in service. So.
sorry. You can-
So I'm, basically the operator or ReGen would tell the other party that something's wrong. For the other party to take action on it.
Mhm.
That's usually done in a collegial manner at first, before it gets to the point of being at impasse. And so more minor differences can be solved outside the formal terms of the contract of issuing a formal notice to cure.
Okay,
For many things are staying the same. The operator will have the compliance responsibilities, because that's what permits are issued for. They're issued to perform operations and activities, and that's generally performed by the operator. So they're in the prime and best position to conduct compliance activities. ReGen will have some oversight, as a permit owner, and probably function in a review capacity at just prior to reporting dates. But that's only as a support to the operator.
Just an early on question, the permit owner changed from the days to ReGen. Was there much discussion, concern, problems with that move?
No, it was really straightforward. The operator and the ReGen were surprisingly in similar thought positions
Okay,
about that and other aspects. Just to.
great.
Be fully representative of the history. Keith Day has not been able to make the larger capital investments in the property, together with equipment. So there is in this partnership, past and present, the ReGen has ability and an interest to invest in the fixed asset, the land and property.
Well, it kind of solidified Mr. Day's situation for the next 15 to 25 years.
Exactly, he's probably getting more sleep once this gets signed.
Well, mainly it's because he takes on that financial burden of procuring the equipment. Usually in private sector, you buy a $1 million piece of equipment or plus or minus on that dollar amount. And they'll depreciate over a 10-year period. So when you have an agreement that only lasts 1 or 2 years, you're less likely to take that leap of faith of a new piece of equipment, a new burden. And even if you had to borrow to get it, they want to see a longer term agreement for that to occur. So this will open up some avenues for him as well as us having the right equipment in place, having the right partner in place, and not having an obstruction doing so because we don't fund what he needs.
Good.
So a draft agreement was prepared. You may have received it as early as last night or as late as this morning. In any event, it is available for comment over the next week before the board meeting, and then again at the board meeting. So we're open to receiving any feedback in the next 2 weeks.
Sure.
Rates are part of the existing agreement that will carry to this agreement. The rates go through this year, this fiscal year. And staff will need to bring back to the board the proposed future rates at a different time. So we're not committing to rates in the new agreement. Those get committed over time as presented to the board. And those are generally negotiated between the two parties.
Questions, Peter? No? I was just curious where we are in garnering that permit process and moving that permit to ReGen. Have we completed that process?
We have.
Acquiring that?
We have not. We're at the point of making the application.
Okay.
And it's an administrative process that may take as long as 90 days.
Okay.
It should be pretty much just sign and stamp on behalf of the regulators.
Okay. And then in terms of the agreement, I was just looking, I was reading, trying to read through it as quickly as I could a little bit. And it talks about sort of the area, right? The approximately 30 acres to Keith Day. And I'm just curious, as we look out 15 years, what changes does Keith Day see in his business? In that, are they gonna need more acreage? Is there gonna be more that he's gonna have to handle? I'm just wondering, I know this is a long contract, and so I'm just trying to see if this agreement fits within his constraints that he'll need within that 15 years.
Excellent questions. The big picture is that the permit and that composting facility has been at 60 acres, on the permit since the late 80s. And that land was available, that 60 acres, until ReGen built the truck yard facility. And interrupted that 60 acres. So for the purpose of the agreement, we're citing about 30 acres, but for the purpose of the permit, it's still issued at 60.
Hmm,
It will give a little bit of opportunity for use where the, pilot, study, anaerobic digester is located in that area. And possibly adjacent the truck yard, there's some open land there. Both of those are part of that 60 acres in the permit. And so, there is some availability there. That being said, the operation is near capacity, today. We're probably at 85 to 90% of the volume throughput. So, there's not a lot that can be done unless there's a permit change. In capacity to enlarge the capacity.
oh, because a permit isn't for the acreage, obviously, it's for the tonnage?
Well, it cites the acreage,
Okay,
which is 60 acres for the permit.
yeah,
But recognize that now a truck yard's part of that
right,
area. But it also has other limitations on the operations, and volume throughput is one of those.
okay,
And so, we don't see an immediate change in the next 5 to 7 years. And generally, it's preferred if the impetus of the change is the public's need,
mm,
as opposed to the operators,
right,
interests.
Yeah.
Um,
okay.
uh,
So for this time period, this 30 acres is gonna be adequate enough.
Yes,
And I think there's a couple other components is, so with the term, we essentially go to cover aerated static pile, which
Mhm.
will be a shorter period of time to create the
Right, so you could
compost, so
process more.
we may have to go back to the permit to allow more volume, but I think the process may allow for more volume to happen without having more area space
Okay,
to achieve that goal.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, good. And then my other question was about the lease payment, $4,000 a month. Is that, has that changed from what he was paying previously, or is that the same?
it's essentially the same,
Seems very economical for him.
yeah, it was 3770 something.
Okay,
A couple of years ago, so it's still right in the 3,000.
Yeah.
Getting close to 4,000 level.
okay,
It's been, a lower than that in the past, and it is low in the larger context of leases.
right, right.
But, that's, helps allow the rates that ReGen publishes to stay a little bit lower.
Mhm.
And, the rates that the Keith Day charges ReGen, which is lower than our rates, so there's a nice differential.
Mhm.
Positive revenue every year.
Yeah.
Resulting from this.
Okay, and then I briefly noticed there was a lot of information in terms of odor and being able to recognize it and tackle it and monitor it, and so I was appreciative of that.
And those are some of the items that occurred over time while he's been here that
Yeah.
we've been able to monitor and track, and thus we added it to the agreement.
Yeah, it's part of the existing agreement that kind of came in 2021. When there was more attention. Or apparent
Mhm.
attention to odor. And so that's, yeah, I think it was captured well. Basically, the operation is responsible for mitigating odors. So that they don't become a public nuisance, a problem in public. That doesn't mean there's no odors. It just means that it's not affecting large numbers of people in a negative way.
Yeah.
Monterey One Water has the same requirement.
Mhm.
We're not in control of the materials that are sent to the facilities to process. And so you know, it's kind of, uh, a statement of fact that there's gonna be odors with the materials that are received here.
And then just one more, since we just received this agreement, I was wondering, is there anything of note that's different than of the previous lease agreement? Besides the things we're changing in terms of the terms?
Really, yeah, they're summarized here on the, on this table. I did use the existing, agreement as the base. And there are several, 3 or 4 new recitals in the first part of that agreement. And minor tweaks to incorporate this kind of, these kind of terms in the rest of the agreement. So it's pretty, you know, it's probably 85 to 90% of the existing agreement.
Okay. Good, thank you.
It does mention the CASP in there as well,
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Right.
the conversion of
Yeah.
the
What's
way
the
we're doing it today
timeframe
to
for
what.
that? What's the time frame for for
It's over the next 2 years.
some 2 years? Okay. Okay, great. Peter, any other thoughts?
Nope.
Ida, I'm assuming we don't have anyone online for comments. Okay. All right. We'll move on to the next item, which is discuss the draft reserve policy revisions to add landfill closure and post-closure reserve.
But we're back with another reserve fund that we wanted to capture for closure and post-closure. We had Helen look into it, and Guy really was behind some of the reserve fundings that have created in the past over the last year. And then this one was also very important for us. We recognize that there's been a shortfall of that funding, and we have ample time to course correct our position on funding closure and post-closure. So at this time, we want to better get into the presentation and really look at some of the revisions that we've done to it and the intent of the policy. It'll share some descriptive narratives of what happens at the landfill when it meets its end of life. You know, the main driving focus is we can't wait till we close, as we stop generating revenue at that point. Thus, it's much harder to fund a closure. So being prepared and creating a fund, maybe not capturing everything we need right now, but continue to be curious about how we continue to fully fund closure when it happens, you know, 120 years to 130 years from now. Pretty excited about this reserve policy.
So a little background on the reserve policy. It was adopted in 2002 as only an operating reserve and at a level of 25% of the annual operating expenses. So that's where the reserve policy began. It was amended in 2009 to reduce the amount of reserve to 20% of the annual operating expenditures. And then amended again in June of 2022 to add the capital equipment reserve and the capital infrastructure reserve. The kind of the mechanisms for those three, the operating reserve is a defined amount, and it's annually defined that way in the budget process. So it's, you know, managed by the accounting manager, and has been you know, as predictable as the budget has been that it occurs. The capital equipment reserve and infrastructure reserve are a little interactive process where there is a recommendation annually for the reserve amount. There is some guidance, you know, in the reserve policy to establish that amount. That's generally the initial proposal for the annual funding of the reserve. But it's not a determinant or a fixed amount. The board can engage in discussions with the staff to discuss alternate funding amounts annually if there's any specific needs or desires to vary from the target approach, target method. And again, it's reviewed annually by the board and staff, and they're adopted as directed by the board. So, you know, some control by the board on the capital equipment reserve, rate of funding and capital infrastructure rate of funding. What's not in the reserve policy and what's being proposed additions is that there be a additional reserves, one for closure, which is basically securing the disposal facility by the time it ends its disposal capacity. It can involve just the landfill and the environmental control systems and monitoring systems around the landfill. And that's basically the starting point. And for a site like this, that likely will have continuing business after disposal with recycling activities. Those type of other facilities on the same property would generally fall outside of closure. While at a landfill only site, other buildings that weren't a functioning business could potentially be part of the closure requirements, abandoning those. Anyway, one of the main parts of closure is putting a liner system over the top of waste that actually ties into the base liner system that's under the waste. And that's referred to as a landfill cap or final cap. Those are kind of some of the terms used. Its main purpose is to put a barrier between the waste and the environment and, you know, and human exposure. It's controlling moisture and gas, among other things. That process can occur right at the end of life for smaller landfills where there's not a lot of work to do. Or it can be completed in increments over time that ends up at the closure time of the landfill where there's not as much work left to actually close the landfill. So what often happens is for larger landfills, the exterior slopes that have already been finished at lower elevations, those generally get completed during the operating time frame of the landfill. So that's referred to as a partial closure. There's a regulatory process to go through to get that certified. That allows that section of the landfill to not be a liability at the end of the landfill life. so that eventually there is some, financial credit for it being in place. Often the operator has interest to do partial closures early because they're excavating an area for new disposal capacity. And there's a benefit to be handling that soil, which is, can be used in parts of the cap construction. The other category is after the landfill's been closed, and that's called post-closure, where the operator is required to care for the landfill facility. The landfill itself, its stormwater drainage systems, its gas collection systems, leachate and condensate collection systems, the various monitoring of network around the landfill for assessing whether there's been any releases or leaks from the landfill. That care is taken over a regulatory required 30 years of time. And it can be longer if the waste mass has not reached an inert state. Or it's less likely that it can be a lesser time. One would really need a special petition to and evidence to demonstrate an earlier than 30-year closure. So this is a time period when there's no disposal revenues at that landfill. Maybe ReGen will have another landfill by then and be getting disposal revenue somewhere else, but nonetheless, the concept here is that there are no revenues during this 30 years coming from disposal activity.
Does the, is that, I mean, obviously there's monitoring that's done for that land, but can that land be used for anything else during that time, or does it render it non-useful? Like there can be nothing done with that brings revenue.
No, there are possibilities for other uses that wouldn't need to be part of the approved final closure plan. So that use is approved and determined to be consistent with these other requirements. So there's known to be golf courses, parks, open spaces.
Recreation facilities. I mean, there's one up in the South Bay area. That's a former landfill site, and they
Right.
hold, I can't remember, it's a place where they hold concerts.
Right. Shoreline amphitheater.
Yeah, Shoreline, yeah.
There's also all the ones they haven't discovered that are going to take place in the next 30 years that will be added to it.
Absolutely.
So, going on 59 years of landfill operation and there's, not been significant, savings for closure and post-closure. There is a, state required, financial assurance mechanism. It's, foreclosure and post-closure. I think it's on the order of, about $2 million, combined at this time. It's an annual process where the operator makes a submittal, and that submittal is reviewed and generally accepted because there's a kind of prescriptive formula for how it changes every year. And as long as that change is made, and there's no other external new elements, that assurance mechanism is approved, and ReGen has that. It's in place, but it's not sufficient for closure, which has got about a $60 million current total liability and post-closure is about a $17 million current liability. So before another 59 years go by, staff recommends that we start putting some cash away in these accounts like the other reserves. They're not irreversible, but it's a good practice to have. And you know, to that point of them not being irreversible, if I guess if there was some emergency crisis that were ever to confront the ReGen, that, you know, these would just be a couple more safety valves financially, should they be needed. So, there was you'll see in the packet that the reserve policy was a red line strikeout version. So you could see where the changes were made to the existing reserve policy. These two categories are proposed. The initial approach is to suggest a kind of a minimum annual funding level. And you know, allow some flexibility to the you know, board and the financial leads on managing the cash generated from revenue amongst the different reserves.
Can I ask a couple questions?
Sure.
How large is the reserve at the present time? This is the liability. How much have we been set aside?
Well, for that financial assurance that the state requires, it's around $2 million for these two combined. We also have, the state has accepted ReGen's pledge of revenues to cover such activities.
But we have $77 million of liability, and we have $2 million set aside.
Yes,
And so the other 75 million is a trust me, the state said it's fine.
yeah, well, yeah, it's trust ReGen that we're gonna generate enough business revenues to pay for it, because that's the pledge, is pledge of revenues.
In the next 30 years or so, are we going to try to generate the incremental 75 million to bring it to 77?
This is a question where staff is looking for feedback from you today and again at the board meeting. What kind of time frame does the board want to define for this? We, you know, predicted that's more than 100 years of disposal capacity remaining. So, you know, what time period does one want to accomplish? We also have the guiding principle of 75 years of capacity dedicated for member agencies. So take 75 years and you know, generate an accrual schedule.
Is staff recommending that ReGen increase the reserve from 2 million to 77 million?
No, we're requesting that the ReGen establish a closure reserve and a post-closure reserve and start funding that separately from the financial assurance mechanism that the state requires. So that we start developing these funds over some period of time, 50 years, 30 years, 50 years, 75 years. We're looking for some feedback on that, but at the minimum, that doesn't need to be decided today. Let's at least
Doesn't
start.
the normal procedure staff recommends to the board we think we should be at 77 or 72 or 100 or whatever. And then board reviews that recommendation and yay or nay. As opposed to feedback the other way around where the board goes to staff and tells staff what's the minimum.
Well, they have recommended it because they wrote up a closure and post-closure policy.
These are liabilities.
Right, so in, this isn't on here, but in our packet, Redline, they have their draft closure policy, and it looks like the target reserve balance for the closure is, you're looking at maybe 400,000 per year, which I did a quick, like, times 50 years, how many is, what's that gonna get
20
us? And
million.
it was like, very good. So, so I was just gonna ask, how did you come up with 400,000? Like, what was your thinking behind that?
It was about 50% of the annual need. It was approximating that, and it was considered to be an entry level because this is the first time this policy has been delivered. And it would allow some flexibility on the approach to beginning to accrue funds to offset those liabilities. There's some financial margin that allows business to continue while still developing some funds in this account.
I just want to comment, I think it's really important that we take advantage that we have outside of the member agencies revenue coming in right now. You know, we were to wait until there's 75 years left, we put the burden all on the member agencies. So taking advantage of that now, we also have the greenways volume that comes in till 2036. That's additional revenue coming in. So my recommendation is that we don't wait any longer, that we start contributing. Again, at a marginal pace, it may increase as desired, based on our revenue performance. But we have challenges coming up to 2036. After that, we hopefully that our position has changed on diversifying the revenue up to 2036 so that we can still continue to contribute. But staff is recommending we don't wait any much longer. Usually you'll see this happen when the landfill opens in the private industry. This is day one, all the way up until the last ton comes into that facility.
Yeah, every customer is paying a piece of this
Right.
through the whole activity.
I would think it'd be appropriate to develop a schedule that would show X number of years and pick 40 years if you like 40. And the total thing is 75 million that we're short, if that's the case, and divide the numbers and develop that over a period of time. And there's some investment. Now, if the 75 million, is that a fixed number? Or does that include investment income on top of it for the next 40 years? Because it would depend upon how you raise the funds and so forth. But to recommend that to the board.
That's,
Those
those
were two questions that you essentially had, was
well,
funding mechanism and funding account.
right, they were, what's being presented is more flexible to allow those to be developed over time with the coordination of finance and the board. So the choice is have a rigid policy that has, exact amounts that may impact a fiscal year, at some point in time. Or the opposite is to establish a little more flexible program at the start to allow funding to happen somewhat at the board's and, staff accounting's recommendation to what level it can happen. on any given year in the next, 5 years or so. And allow time to, develop a more rigid schedule, with, some forecasting of future business to see that the two are compatible.
I like the flexibility in this. First of all, I like that we're doing this. So yay to the closure, post-closure reserve policy. So thank you for putting this together. I'm assuming you've come up with annual amounts, the 400,000, I think the other one was 120,000 for post-closure. That fits within our budget for now. And I think that's fine. I mean, we are looking, this is 100+ years out that we're having to try and guess. There's a lot of things that can happen between now and then. I think the important part is that we are establishing this policy, that we are coming up with an amount of money that is not insignificant. It is something that will make a difference for people who are gonna be here, past our time. So I appreciate that. So I would, so thank you for putting this together.
Yeah, and as this is a proposed change, other changes can be made, at any time,
Right.
in the future, between board and staff. And again, there's nothing in this policy that restricts the funding to be greater than those suggested amounts.
Mhm.
And so, a fiscal year condition that might have excess cash, you could take advantage of.
Right.
Or lesser.
Or
Mhm. Yeah. Okay. And any other comments, Peter?
I think it's a great start and, none of us will be here in 100 years, but we'll set the tone.
Hopefully my grandkids, great-grandkids will
Great.
thank you for this.
Great.
Thank you. All right. I'm assuming no one out in the public, Ada, to comment on this?
No.
Okay. All right, we'll move on to more fun stuff to discuss the declaration of surplus equipment. Chevrolet flatbread, yeah.
Yeah, so this is pretty simple. We have a piece of equipment that's pretty outdated, 18 years old, approaching 20-year mark. And we will be putting up for surplus and getting rid of it.
is this the loader or the excavator?
No, it's the flatbed truck,
Oh,
this vehicle here.
sorry.
Morris.
Yeah.
It's the end of its
I
life.
trust you.
All right, good.
Sounds good.
Good.
It's had a good life.
It's
Yeah.
had a good life.
Yeah, very good life. And that one is gonna be, what's the process? It's gonna be
It'll be scrapped.
auctioned? Oh,
It'll be
scrapped.
scrapped, yeah.
It'll be
It doesn't meet the CARB compliance anymore.
Oh, got it, okay. All right. Questions, Peter? We don't need to vote or anything, we're just.
This is a discussion, right?
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, sounds good. Let's move on to the next one.
Consent calendar.
It'll be on the consent, yeah.
Okay,
Got the board.
sounds good. All right, we'll discuss the purchase of a new Caterpillar excavator.
So new excavator will cost us $347,000. It is in our budget schedule, so it's another piece of asset that comes into play with capital and timing. Jake?
The next two items are part of the airborne replacement schedule. The goal is to replace older tier 1-3 units with newer tier 4 low emission units by the end of 2026.
Got it, okay,
So in our budget, on our schedule,
Yep.
and it ties back to airborne compliance.
so is it a different engine? Yeah, okay,
It's essentially a similar engine, but it's higher performing and has some pollution control
okay,
aspects to it that,
okay.
render it much more, less
Climate
pollution.
friendly. Yeah, okay. All right. Questions, Peter?
Nope.
You good? All right. Moving on to the next one, purchase of a new Caterpillar loader.
Same instance,
Same thing.
Were these two both included in the budget?
yes.
Thank you.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you. All right, moving on to general manager communications.
Sure, a few items, ReGen Monterey team members attended the West End. The West End celebration engaged with over 1,500 attendees. We had volunteers and workers show up. We had a wonderful time educating the public. You know, from the time that we set up the stand, Helen and I, David were there on Sunday morning. And we had people come through as soon as we put up the tent, curious, engaged. You know, we learned from each other as well, educating the community what their interests are, what they're looking for, what their challenges are. So we were able to share with the team. So we had a really good time at the West End. We also gave about 1,000 free stainless steel cups, free water refills in collaboration with the disaster cleanup specialists that provide refillable water stations. And also offering a discount on the coffee and other beverages at the event as well. Engine number 4 in our cogen plant is in dire need of repair. Has an engine block that failed, crankshaft was damaged along the way, so we're making a recommendation to replace that as soon as possible. Every day down is very difficult, so this will be another item that you'll see in the board packet coming soon. I attended the Monterey Chamber of Commerce. We shared the services that we're providing to the chamber from Monterey. They came as part of the leadership tour and they asked if I would show up and share services. So, you know, I think continuing to share the message of the services that we're providing. You know, the dump is no longer adequate term for our location. We do much more than just landfilling. And sharing with others to share our pathway of what we're doing here was very exciting. Clean California earmarks their 3 years of progress. I thought this was a really important announcement that came through. You know, through Clean California projects, they've collected over 50,000 tires, 12,000 mattresses, 2.6 million cubic yards of litter collected, enough to cover 9 lanes of Interstate 5 with an inch of trash from San Diego to the Canadian border. They've created 18,000 jobs. It was launched in July of 2021. It was a $1.2 billion initiative. These statistics are a reminder that people generate waste, and if people don't handle it properly, handling it is recycled, treatment facilities, and landfill disposal. Their waste causes problems for the community and the environment. And so we want to make sure that we reflect on that as well. We are a service to the community. If we didn't have services like landfills and water treatment plants, what would our landscape look like? So it's a reminder that we don't generate anything. We just provide a service to manage and handle waste for the community. So extremely excited to report on the Clean California 3 years in action. So thank you. That's all I got.
Super, thank you. All right, I don't think we have any future agenda items that we'd like to bring forward, so we'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting. Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.